Through the iron gates of the arena, dragged by chains thick enough to moor a ship, comes what remains of Marcus Aurelius Valerius. Once, this man stood 7 feet tall, a giant among the Germanic tribes whose very presence on a battlefield could turn the tide of war. His shoulders were broad enough to carry the hopes of an entire nation, his arms powerful enough to cleave through Roman shields like kindling. But now, after months in Rome's deepest dungeons, after the journey from the Rhine frontier in chains, after the systematic breaking that Roman jailers call preparation, he is barely recognizable as human. His skin hangs in tatters from weeks of scourging. His back is a map of Roman cruelty, each lash mark a testament to their methodical brutality. His once golden hair, the pride of Germanic warriors, has been shaved away, leaving only stubble and scars. The beard that once made Roman children flee in terror is matted with blood and filth. Yet even now, even as the crowd hurls curses and rotten fruit at his broken form, something burns in his eyes that makes the bravest centurion look away. Emperor Trajan rises from his imperial box, resplendent in purple silk that costs more than most men will see in a lifetime. His voice, amplified by the arena's perfect acoustics, cuts through the crowd's roar like a blade through flesh. Citizens of Rome, behold the fate of those who would dare challenge the eternal city. This barbarian, this pretender to civilization, thought his mud huts and animal skins could stand against Roman steel. The crowd erupts in approval, but you catch something in Trajan's voice, a tremor that speaks not of confidence, but of fear. For this is the man who destroyed 3 entire Roman legions, who united the fractured Germanic tribes into a weapon that nearly drove Rome back to the Alps. This is the man whose name is whispered in terror from Gaul to Dacia, whose very existence proves that Rome's invincibility is a lie. But to understand the horror that is about to unfold, to comprehend the true magnitude of what Rome is about to destroy, we must journey back 35 years, to a time when the Rhine frontier knew peace, when Germanic children played in meadows that had not yet been watered with their parents' blood. The year is 68 CE, and in the rolling green valleys of what Romans call Germania Inferior, a child is born to Arminius the plowman, a farmer whose greatest ambition is to see his grain ripen golden in the autumn sun. They named the boy Marcus, not after any Roman but after an ancestor, who once fought alongside the great Arminius against Varus in the Teutoburg forest. The irony that he shares a name with Rome's greatest emperor will not be lost on history. Young Marcus grows tall and strong in the shadow of the Rhine, drinking deeply from the pure streams that flow down from the northern forests. His father teaches him the ways of peace, how to read the sky for coming storms, how to judge the ripeness of grain by its whisper in the wind, how to gentle a wild horse with patience rather than force. His mother, Brunhilde, whose name means armored battle maiden, fills his head with the old stories, tales of heroes who stood against impossible odds, of warriors whose courage burned brighter than funeral pyres. Germania in Marcus's youth is a land blessed by the gods. The tribes have made their peace with Rome's presence on the far side of the Rhine. Trade flows freely, Germanic amber and furs for Roman wine and metalwork. Roman merchants walk safely through Germanic villages, their Latin mixing with the harsh consonants of the tribal tongues. Children on both sides of the river grow up thinking that this balance, this careful coexistence, will last forever. But peace is a flower that blooms only in the absence of ambitious men, and Rome has never lacked for ambition. In the imperial palace, advisors whisper of the riches that lie beyond the Rhine, forests thick with valuable timber, streams heavy with gold, and most importantly, millions of barbarians who could be enslaved or taxed into submission. The Germanic tribes, they argue, grow to prosperous, to confident. Better to crush them now, while they still think of Romans as trading partners rather than conquerors. The end of innocence comes on a spring morning in 75 CE, when Marcus is barely 7 years old. He wakes to the sound his child's mind cannot immediately recognize, the rhythmic tramp of hobnailed boots, the jingle of mail, the creak of leather and wood that marks the passage of a Roman army on the march. His father appears in the doorway of their small home, his face gray with a fear that transforms him from the strong man Marcus has always known into something smaller, more fragile. "Take your mother and sister to the forest," Arminius whispers, his voice barely audible above the growing thunder of the approaching legion. "Hide in the old cave by the waterfall. Don't come out until the stars have turned twice in the sky." But Marcus is 7 years old, and 7-year-olds do not always obey their fathers. Instead of fleeing to safety, he climbs the great oak tree that grows beside their home, scrambles up through its branches until he has a clear view of the village and the horror that is about to unfold. The Romans come not as traitors, but as conquerors. 3 cohorts of the 14 Gemina, veterans of the Jewish wars whose shields bear the scars of Jerusalem's walls. They march in perfect formation, their scarlet cloaks bright as blood in the morning sun, their steel gleaming like scales on some monstrous serpent. At their head rides Tribune Gaius Vindex, a man whose cruelty is legend even among hardened legionnaires. The slaughter begins without warning, without provocation, without mercy. Roman soldiers pour into the village like a plague of locusts, their swords already drawn, their faces set in the expressions of men who have done this before and will do it again. They are not here for conquest, they are here for extermination. Marcus watches in paralyzed horror as his neighbors, people who have known him since birth, are cut down like wheat before the scythe. Old Henrik the storyteller, whose tales of ancient heroes filled Marcus's dreams, falls with a gladius through his chest, his blood spattering the very stones where children played just moments before. Gerda the weaver, who made the cloak that keeps Marcus warm through winter nights, screams once before a Roman blade opens her throat, her life spilling out in crimson streams. His father, his strong, gentle father who could lift a full-grown bull and yet wouldn't harm a sparrow, tries to protect their neighbors with nothing but a farming sickle against Roman steel. Marcus watches Arminius the plowman die as he lived, thinking of others before himself, his body pierced by 6 spears, his last act shielding a child who will die anyway moments later. But the killing is only the beginning. When the last villager has fallen, when the cobblestones run red with blood, and the air fills with the screams of the dying, Tribune Vindex gives the order that will haunt Marcus's dreams for the rest of his life: burn it all. Roman soldiers move through the village with systematic efficiency, touching torches to every building, every store of grain, every symbol of the life that once flourished here. The homes where families gathered for evening meals become roaring infernos. The barn where Marcus learned to gentle horses fills with smoke and flame. The small temple where his people offered prayers to their ancient gods becomes a pyre for everything they once held sacred. From his perch in the oak tree, Marcus watches his entire world die. The heat from the burning buildings sears his face. Even at a distance, the smoke fills his lungs and makes his eyes stream with tears that have nothing to do with the fire's sting. The screams of the wounded and dying mix with the roar of flames and the crash of collapsing timbers, until sound itself becomes an instrument of torture. When the Romans finally ride away, satisfied with their morning's work, they leave behind nothing but ash and bone. Marcus climbs down from his tree on legs that shake like autumn leaves, his 7-year-old mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what he has witnessed. He wanders through the ruins of his village, stepping carefully round bodies he recognizes, searching desperately for some sign that his family survived. He finds his mother and sister in the forest cave where they were supposed to hide, their throats opened by Roman daggers. They died holding each other, and their blood has long since cooled by the time Marcus discovers them. The boy who woke that morning as a farmer's son dies in that moment, and something else is born, something harder, something colder, something that will grow in the darkness of loss and pain until it becomes a force that will shake the foundations of empire. Marcus survives the next 10 years through pure will and the kindness of strangers. Germanic tribes across the Rhine regions taken survivors of Roman pacification campaigns. Though they can barely feed their own children, he grows tall and strong on a diet of grief and rage, his body developing the massive frame that will one day make Roman soldiers cross themselves in fear, his mind absorbing every story of Roman brutality that filters across the tribal networks. By his 17th year, Marcus stands 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that strain the limits of any shirt and hands that can crush walnuts like grapes. His hair has grown back thick and golden, flowing past his shoulders in the manner of Germanic warriors. His beard, carefully tended despite his youth, gives him the appearance of a man 10 years older, but it is his eyes that mark him as different, eyes that have seen too much, that burn with a cold fire that makes even seasoned warriors uncomfortable. The tribes speak of him in whispers. Some say he is blessed by Wotan, the war god who hangs from the world tree to gain wisdom. Others claim he is cursed, that the spirits of his murdered family walk beside him and whisper strategies in his ear. What none can deny is his growing reputation as a fighter whose skill borders on the supernatural. Marcus's first kill comes at 18, not in some grand battle, but in a squalid tavern outside Mogontiacum where Roman soldiers drink. Away there, guilt and Germanic refugees sell what little they have left for copper coins. A centurion, drunk on wine and drunk on his own power, decides that a Germanic girl serving drinks would make fine entertainment for him and his men. Marcus rises from his table in the corner like a storm cloud forming on a clear day. He moves with the fluid grace of a born fighter, each step deliberate and measured. The centurion, secure in his assumption that no barbarian would dare challenge Roman authority, barely has time to register the threat before Marcus's hand closes around his throat. What follows is not a fight, but an execution. Marcus lifts the centurion off his feet with one hand, his grip tightening like a vice around the Roman's windpipe. The other soldiers reach for their weapons, but they are drunk and slow, and Marcus has been preparing for this moment his entire adult life. His free hand tears a gladius from its sheath and begins the work that will define the rest of his existence. The tavern becomes an abattoir. Marcus moves through the Romans like death personified, his stolen blade opening throats and piercing hearts with surgical precision. He kills not with the wild fury of a berserker, but with the cold efficiency of a man who has counted the cost of every Roman breath and found it too expensive to permit. When the last soldier falls, Marcus stands amid the carnage like some ancient god of war. His clothes are soaked with blood, his face spattered with the life essence of his enemies, but his breathing is steady and his hands do not shake. The Germanic refugees stare at him with expressions of awe and terror, uncertain whether they have witnessed salvation or damnation. Word of the tavern massacre spreads like wildfire through the Germanic territories. The young giant who killed 8 Romans with his bare hands becomes a legend overnight. Tribal warriors make pilgrimages to see him, to touch his weapons, to hear him speak of the day when the Rhine will run red with Roman blood. But Marcus understands that random violence, however satisfying, will not drive Rome back across the Alps. He begins to study his enemies with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. He learns Latin from captured documents, memorizes Roman military manuals, maps their supply lines and fortifications. Most importantly, he begins to understand the one weakness that could destroy Rome's seemingly invincible war machine: arrogance. Romans believe themselves superior to barbarians in every way that matters. They assume that Germanic warriors are brave but stupid, fierce but undisciplined, dangerous individually but incapable of coordinated strategy. This assumption has served them well for decades, allowing relatively small Roman forces to defeat much larger Germanic armies. Through superior organization and tactics, Marcus realizes that Rome's greatest strength, their certainty in their own superiority, can be turned into their greatest weakness. If he can convince them that they face nothing more than another barbarian uprising, they will respond with predictable arrogance. And arrogance, as any hunter knows, makes even the mightiest predator vulnerable. The plan that forms in Marcus's mind is audacious beyond anything the Germanic tribes have ever attempted. Instead of the traditional pattern of seasonal raids and individual tribal wars, he envisions a coordinated campaign that will unite every tribe from the North Sea to the Danube into a single weapon aimed at Rome's heart. The first step is diplomacy, a skill that Marcus teaches himself through necessity. He spends 2 years traveling from tribe to tribe, speaking in their councils, sharing their fires, earning their trust through actions rather than words. The Cruci remember his name, and welcome him as the heir to their ancient glory. The Chatti see in him the warrior king their prophecies foretold. The Suebi, greatest of all Germanic tribes, test his strength in combat and find him worthy of their steel. One by one, the tribes bind themselves to Marcus's vision. They swear oaths before their gods, mix their blood with his in ancient ceremonies, pledge their warriors to a war that will either free Germania forever or exterminate them all in the attempt. By his 21st year, Marcus commands the largest Germanic army ever assembled, nearly 40,000 warriors, hungry for Roman blood. But numbers alone will not defeat Rome's professional legions. Marcus spends months drilling his army, teaching them the discipline that has made Romans masters of the battlefield. Germanic warriors learn to fight in formation, to coordinate their attacks, to follow complex battle plans that require patience rather than individual heroics. The transformation is remarkable. Warriors who once thought tactics were for cowards learn to appreciate the deadly beauty of coordinated movement. Tribal chiefs who have spent their lives feuding with their neighbors discover the intoxicating power of unity. For the first time in generations, the Germanic people stand as one, and the sight of their combined might makes the earth itself seem to tremble. The trap Marcus sets for Rome is a masterpiece of misdirection. He allows Roman spies to discover evidence of tribal unrest near the Rhine frontier, carefully planting information that suggests a traditional barbarian uprising, dangerous but manageable, requiring a strong response but not the full might of the legions. Governor Lucius Nerva, commanding the Rhine armies from his comfortable headquarters in Cologne, responds exactly as Marcus predicted, confident that a single legion supported by auxiliary troops will be sufficient to crush another barbarian revolt. He dispatches the 21 Rapax under General Marcus Hordionius Flaccus to restore order to the frontier. The 21 Rapax is a veteran formation, blooded in the civil wars and seasoned by decades of frontier fighting. 5,000 professional soldiers march north from Cologne in perfect formation, their eagles gleaming in the autumn sun, their confidence absolute. They have faced Germanic warriors before and emerged victorious. They see no reason why this time should be different. Marcus allows the legion to penetrate deep into Germanic territory, beyond the reach of reinforcement, beyond the possibility of retreat. He shadows their movement with small bands of warriors, always visible just long enough to maintain the illusion that they face nothing more than a large tribal raiding party. The Romans push forward, eager to bring their barbarian enemies to battle and end this campaign with a decisive victory. The killing ground Marcus chooses is a valley called Idus of Eso, by the local tribes, bounded on three sides by steep hills and thick forest. The Romans enter the valley in classic formation, cavalry screening the flanks, legionaries in the center, baggage train protected by the rear guard. They advance confidently, secure in their superiority, completely unaware that 40,000 Germanic warriors wait hidden in the surrounding forest. Marcus waits until the entire Roman force has committed to the valley floor, until retreat becomes impossible, until their confidence peaks at the moment before it shatters forever. Then, with a blast from the ancient war horns that once summoned Arminius to battle, he springs his trap. What follows defies every military manual ever written. Germanic warriors pour from the forest like a human avalanche, their war cries echoing off the valley walls until the very air seems to scream. They strike the Roman column from all sides simultaneously, turning disciplined formation into chaos. Confident advance into desperate struggle for survival. The Romans, for all their training and experience, have never faced anything like this. Germanic warriors fight with the fury of men avenging their murdered families, led by a giant whose very presence seems to bend reality around him. Marcus wades through the Roman ranks like a force of nature, his great sword cleaving through shield and armor as if they were made of parchment. But this is not the wild charge of undisciplined barbarians. Marcus's warriors move with deadly coordination, each tribal contingent assigned specific targets. Every maneuver planned and rehearsed until it flows like a dance of death. Roman cavalry finds itself trapped between Germanic spear walls. Legionnaires discover that their enemy knows their tactics better than they do themselves. General Flaccus watching his invincible legion disintegrate around him, makes the desperate decision that ensures his doom. Instead of fighting defensively and hoping for rescue, he orders his remaining forces to break out through what appears to be the weakest point in the Germanic encirclement. It is exactly what Marcus hoped he would do. The weak point is a carefully prepared kill zone, defended by the Suebi warriors, whose prowess in battle is legendary even among their own people. The Roman breakout attempt becomes a slaughter that will be remembered. As long as men speak of war, Flaccus dies with a Germanic spear through his chest, his last words a curse upon the barbarian who has destroyed everything he held dear. By sunset, the 21 rapax has ceased to exist. Of 5,000 men who marched into Itastaviso, fewer than 300 escape to carry word of the disaster back to Cologne. The Germanic dead number in the hundreds, but their sacrifice has purchased something precious beyond counting, proof that Rome can be defeated, that their legions can be destroyed, that the empire has limits even Roman arrogance cannot transcend. Marcus stands amid the wreckage of Roman ambition as the sun sets over his first great victory. Around him, Germanic warriors strip weapons and armor from the dead, gather the standards that once represented Roman invincibility. But Marcus understands that this is only the beginning. Rome will not accept such a defeat without response, and that response will be terrible beyond imagination. The news of Itastaviso reaches Rome like a thunderball from clear sky. The Senate falls into stunned silence as the surviving centurions describe the systematic destruction of an entire legion. Emperor Trajan, reading the dispatches in his private study, feels something he has not experienced since his youth: fear. But Trajan is not a man to yield to fear, and Rome is not an empire built by those who accept defeat gracefully. Within weeks of receiving the news from Germania, the emperor begins assembling the largest army that has crossed the Rhine since Julius Caesar's time. For full legions, supported by auxiliary troops and allied contingents, march north under the command of General Lucius Cornelius Tacitus, the emperor's most trusted military advisor. Nearly 25,000 professional soldiers converge on the Rhine frontier, their ranks filled with veterans of the Dacian Wars and the Eastern campaigns. They come not for conquest now but for extermination, not to pacify Germania, but to transform it into a wasteland where nothing will grow except Roman monuments to Germanic folly. Marcus watches this massive army assemble through his network of spies and informants. He understands that the game has changed, that Rome now recognizes him as a threat worthy of their full attention. The easy victory at Itastaviso will not be repeated. This time, he faces the professional cream of Roman military might, led by commanders who have learned from their predecessors' mistakes. The campaign that follows spans to brutal years and devastates the land between the Rhine and Elbe. Marcus proves himself a master of defensive warfare, using the forests and rivers of his homeland to frustrate Roman attempts at decisive battle. His army strikes like lightning and vanishes like morning mist, hitting supply columns and isolated garrisons before melting back into the wilderness that Romans fear but cannot conquer. For a time, it seems as though David might triumph over Goliath through cunning and determination. Marcus's reputation spreads throughout the barbarian world, inspiring resistance from Britannia to the Black Sea. Roman commanders begin to report unusual coordination among previously scattered tribes, sophisticated attacks that suggest Germanic military thinking has evolved beyond traditional patterns. But Rome's greatest strength has always been its ability to adapt, to learn from defeat and transform weakness into strength. General Tacitus, despite his advanced age, proves himself more than equal to the challenge of fighting an enemy who knows Roman tactics. As well as any Roman general, the end begins with betrayal. As it always does in stories like this, Segist, chief of a minor tribal confederation, makes the calculation that Rome's victory is inevitable and decides to purchase safety for his people by selling information about Marcus's movements. The price is 20,000 gold aurei and a comfortable retirement in some peaceful Roman province far from the Rhine frontier. Tacitus uses Segist's intelligence to set his own trap, a masterpiece of tactical planning that takes advantage of everything he has learned about his barbarian opponent. False information is fed through channels he knows Marcus monitors, painting a picture of Roman weakness and opportunity that proves irresistibly tempting. The battle that ends Marcus's dream of Germanic independence takes place on the muddy fields outside modern-day Minden, where the Weser River bends through rolling countryside that has seen too much blood already. Marcus arrives with 15,000 warriors, expecting to crush a vulnerable Roman column. Instead, he finds himself facing the full might of Tacitus's army, deployed in defensive positions that have been prepared for weeks. The fighting is savage beyond description, a collision of armies that shakes the earth and fills the sky with smoke. Germanic courage meets Roman discipline in combat that lasts from dawn until dusk, neither side giving ground, neither willing to admit defeat. Marcus himself leads charge after charge against the Roman lines, his giant form visible even in the chaos of battle, inspiring his followers to feats of heroism that bards will sing of for generations. But heroism alone cannot overcome the mathematics of warfare. Tacitus has more men, better equipment, and the advantage of prepared positions. As the day wears on, Germanic casualties mount while Roman reserves remain uncommitted. One by one, tribal contingents break and flee, their courage exhausted, their leaders dead or dying. Marcus fights on even as his army disintegrates around him, even as his closest friends fall beside him, even as hope fades like light in a winter sky. He kills Romans until his sword breaks in his hands, then tears weapons from fallen enemies and continues the slaughter. Roman officers mark his position by the growing pile of their dead soldiers, but even their combined efforts cannot bring him down. The end comes not from Roman steel, but from Germanic betrayal. One of Segust's warriors, a young man whose family was supposedly killed by Romans, but who has actually been bought with Roman gold, approaches Marcus from behind during the height of combat. The spear thrust is perfectly timed, perfectly placed, sliding between the plates of Marcus's captured Roman armor to find the gap that means death. Marcus falls like a great tree, his knees striking the blood-soaked earth with a sound like thunder. Roman soldiers swarm around him, eager to claim credit for killing the barbarian king. But Tacitus himself stops them with a single gesture. This prize is too valuable for common soldiers to claim. As consciousness fades, Marcus hears the Roman general speaking to him in perfect Germanic, words that cut deeper than any blade. Your dreams die with you, barbarian. Your people will forget your name within a generation, and Germania will become another Roman province. You have achieved nothing but the deaths of those who trusted you. But even as darkness claims him, even as Roman chains are fitted to his wrists and ankles, something in Marcus's eyes suggests that Tacitus may be wrong about the forgetting. The journey to Rome takes 3 months, each day a fresh humiliation designed to break whatever spirit remains in the defeated rebel. Marcus is displayed in every major city along the route, chained in a cage barely large enough to contain his massive frame, fed scraps like a wild animal, subjected to the mockery and contempt of Roman citizens who see in his suffering proof of their own superiority. By the time the cage reaches Rome's gates, months of abuse have transformed the giant warrior into something barely recognizable as human. His hair hangs in filthy tangles, his beard is matted with blood and worse things. His skin bears the scars of countless small tortures inflicted for the entertainment of Roman crowds. Yet even now, even reduced to this pitiful state, Marcus refuses to beg. When Roman nobles visit his cell beneath the Colosseum to gape at the famous barbarian king, they find a man whose dignity remains intact despite everything they have done to destroy it. His silence becomes more eloquent than any speech, his endurance more impressive than any victory. Trajan himself comes to see the prisoner, perhaps hoping to find some sign of weakness that will validate Roman assumptions about barbarian inferiority. Instead, he encounters eyes that burn with undiminished fire, a spirit that no amount of torture has been able to break. For a moment, emperor and prisoner regard each other across the gulf that separates civilization from barbarism, and it becomes unclear which is which. The emperor's voice, when he finally speaks, carries a note of genuine curiosity. Why did you do it? You could have lived peacefully. could have avoided all this suffering. Why throw your life away for an impossible dream? Marcus's response. The first words he has spoken in months ring through the dungeon like a bell tolling for the dead. Because some dreams are worth dying for. Roman. Because freedom is not something you can grant or take away. It lives in the heart. And the heart you cannot chain. Trajan leaves without another word. But those who know him well mark a change in his expression. The emperor who entered the dungeon confident in Roman supremacy emerges troubled by doubts he cannot name. The execution itself unfolds exactly as planned. With all the pageantry and brutality that Roman crowds expect, Marcus is dragged into the arena as we witnessed at the beginning, his body already broken by months of systematic torture. The crowd bays for his blood with the enthusiasm of spectators at a gladiatorial contest, eager to see the famous barbarian king humiliated one final time. What they witness instead becomes one of those moments that define civilizations. Even chained, even broken, even facing certain death, Marcus Aurelius Valerius refuses to give Rome the satisfaction of his surrender. He stands as straight as his bonds allow, meets every eye that dares look upon him, and faces his executioners with the dignity of a king. The torture that follows is methodical and prolonged, designed to extract maximum suffering from every moment. Roman executioners are artists of agony, specialists in prolonging life just long enough to inflict unendurable pain. They work with surgical precision, ensuring that Marcus experiences every sensation they can devise while maintaining consciousness to the very end. But something goes wrong with Rome's perfect spectacle. Instead of breaking under torture, instead of begging for mercy or renouncing his cause, Marcus transforms his own execution into something else entirely. A demonstration of what barbarism truly means, and it is not what Romans expected. As the torture continues and Marcus refuses to scream, refuses to break, refuses to give Rome what it wants, something shifts in the Colosseum's atmosphere. The crowd's bloodthirsty cheers grow quieter, then fade to whispers, then die into uncomfortable silence. Roman spectators who came expecting entertainment find themselves witnessing something that makes them question everything they believe about their own superiority. When Marcus finally dies, it is not with a scream or a plea, but with words that echo through the arena like a prophecy. You can kill the dreamer, but you cannot kill the dream. Germania will be free. The silence that follows is absolute. 50,000 Romans sit in stunned quiet, processing what they have just witnessed. Some weep without knowing why. Others stare at their hands as though seeing blood that is not there. All understand, though few will admit it, that they have witnessed something that changes them forever. The emperor rises from his box and leaves without the traditional gesture of approval. The crowd disperses in unusual quiet, many walking home in thoughtful silence instead of the boisterous celebration that usually follows arena spectacles. Rome has gotten exactly what it wanted, the complete destruction of its greatest barbarian enemy. But somehow the victory feels hollow, incomplete, Pyrrhic. Within days of Marcus's execution, disturbing reports begin reaching Roman commanders along the Rhine frontier. Germanic tribes that have remained peaceful for generations suddenly attack Roman outposts. With coordinated fury, the name Marcus Aurelius Valerius becomes a battle cry that strikes terror into Roman hearts. Instead of ending Germanic resistance, his death has transformed it into something far more dangerous. The great irony becomes clear within months of the execution. By making Marcus's death into such a public spectacle, by demonstrating Roman power so completely and brutally, Rome has created exactly what it sought to prevent: a martyred hero, whose example inspires resistance throughout the barbarian world. Germanic mothers tell their children stories of the giant who defied Rome and died unbroken. Warriors swear oaths by Marcus's memory, promising to continue his fight until the last Roman is driven from Germanic soil. Tribal councils that have been enemies for generations unite under banners bearing his name and image. The uprising that follows Marcus's death dwarfs anything the Germanic tribes have attempted before. United by shared outrage and inspired by his example, they launch coordinated attacks that stretch Roman resources to the breaking point. 3 more legions are destroyed in the forests of Germania, their eagles captured. their survivors fleeing in terror from barbarians who fight with unprecedented skill and coordination. Trajan, facing the greatest crisis of his reign, is forced to abandon his eastern campaigns and concentrate Rome's full military might on the Germanic frontier. For 5 years, the empire's best generals and finest troops struggle to contain an uprising that threatens to drive Rome back to the Mediterranean. The cost in blood and gold is staggering, the damage to Roman prestige incalculable. When peace finally comes, it comes not through Roman victory, but through exhaustion on both sides. The Rhine frontier is redrawn, with Rome abandoning territories it has held for decades. Germanic tribes retain their independence in exchange for cessation of hostilities. But everyone understands this is merely a pause in a war that will continue until one side or the other is completely destroyed. The true measure of Marcus's victory becomes clear in the generations that follow. Roman historians, writing decades after his death, struggle to explain how a single barbarian could have caused such massive disruption to imperial plans. They create elaborate theories about Germanic military evolution, about foreign interference, about any explanation that avoids acknowledging the simple truth that one man's refusal to surrender can inspire an entire people to greatness. Germanic bards, meanwhile, transform Marcus Aurelius Valerius into something approaching a god. Their songs speak of the giant who united the tribes, who taught Romans that barbarians could match their discipline and exceed their courage. Children who never saw him fight learn his tactics from memory, absorb his strategies like mothers. Milk, prepare for the day when his work will be completed. The irony cuts both ways. Rome, in seeking to make an example of Marcus through spectacular public execution, creates the very legend it hoped to prevent. Germania, in losing its greatest leader, gains something more valuable, a symbol of resistance that transcends any individual warrior, a dream that cannot be killed because it lives in the collective heart of an entire people. Standing today in the ruins of the Colosseum, you can still sense the echo of that moment when civilization met barbarism and discovered which was which. The stones remember the silence that followed Marcus's final words, the uncomfortable shifting of Roman spectators who came expecting entertainment and found themselves confronting truth instead. Marcus Aurelius Valerius died as he lived, unbroken, unbowed, and utterly defiant. His body was torn apart and scattered to prevent any shrine from marking his grave. But his spirit proved less easy to destroy in every act of resistance against overwhelming power, in every stand taken for freedom against impossible odds, in every refusal to surrender what cannot be surrendered. The ghost of that tall Germanic warrior still walks among us. The dream he died for, the dream of a free Germania, would not be fully realized for many centuries. But dreams, as he told his Roman executioners, have a way of outliving the men who dream them. The empire that killed him is dust, its legions scattered by time, its eagles tarnished by history's judgment. The barbarian king they sought to humiliate has achieved the only immortality that matters. He has become a story that will never end. And so the blood of Marcus Aurelius Valerius, spilled on the sand of the Colosseum to satisfy Roman pride, watered seeds that grew into something Rome could never destroy. His execution, designed as the ultimate demonstration of imperial power, instead became proof that some things transcend power, that some spirits cannot be chained, that some dreams are indeed worth dying for. The man they called barbarian taught civilization its greatest lesson, that dignity is not something that can be granted or taken away, but something that lives in the human heart and burns there until the very end. In seeking to destroy him, Rome only ensured that he would live forever, not in flesh, but in the undying spirit of those who refused to bow to any master save their own, choosing